Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out with the Biden campaign. Is it smart? Is he running a smart campaign, or is he just lucky, or some combination of both? Because if you believe all the polling, and I'm not saying you should, but if you believe it all right now, President Trump might as well just quit today, right? I mean, he's got no shot, according to the polling, of actually winning. I don't believe that for a second. We'll expand upon the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign and everything in between. And I don't know if you've heard this yet or not, but a city in North Carolina is the first city, Asheville, North Carolina, to actually vote to give reparations to black Americans, black citizens of their city. And we'll expand upon exactly what that means. And then there's a museum of African American history in Washington, D.C., and it is paid for in part by taxpayer dollars like yourself. And they have come out now and said that certain aspects, and I would call them success aspects, like, for instance, delayed gratification, other things like that, are part of white culture, and black culture has been forced, if you will, to adopt some of that. So the madness is getting a bit madder day by day in more ways than one. So we'll expand upon that. But we start with an article from Politico and the Joe Biden campaign. This is an opinion piece, by the way, but from Politico. The unappreciated shrewdness of the Biden campaign. The Biden campaign has been lucky most of all, but it's also been smart, at least smart enough. Now, I don't know how true that is. I can tell you right now that the Biden campaign is built on a house of cards. It wouldn't take much, one card removed, for that thing to be tumbling down. I'm not even disputing the polls per se, although I do think that we know from 2016 how much polling can really mean. And I do believe there is a silent majority, or a majority that's afraid to be intimidated out there. And how big it is and whether they'll turn out to vote are questions, certainly. But I do think that Biden's campaign itself, as glamorous as it may look in polling numbers, is actually a bit shaky. To go, back to this article, to go as Joe Biden did, and I agree with this portion for sure, from left for dead after the first three Democratic contests to sweeping to the nomination and quickly thereafter emerging as the favorite to win the presidency in November, is a run of success that would be the envy of any national politician. Yeah, maybe. But let me just say this. I've said this before, but of course, if I say it, it bears repeating. This election is not about Joe Biden. If it ever becomes about Joe Biden, the man, the candidate, his record, how he currently, his cognizant, his ability right now, it's over. Because there's no one in their right mind could honestly say that Joe Biden is qualified right now mentally and everything else to be president of the United States. No one can really that knows the truth. So if this comes down to what the American people feel about Joe Biden, I don't think he can win. But it never has been about Joe Biden. Just like this article, this paragraph I just read implies, there's no way he should be the Democratic nominee. They had him written off that he was dead before the campaign ever even started. The truth is, Joe Biden is a lousy candidate. He's always been a lousy candidate, and he still is a lousy candidate. This is not about Joe Biden. It is about Donald Trump, period. Plain and simple. And I'll expand on that in just a moment. Back to the article. It says it's easy to consider this a mere accident, the fact that Joe Biden is doing as well as he's doing, given the weakness of Biden's opponents. Now, they're talking about the 2020 field. First, a socialist in the Democratic primaries who always had a ceiling on his support, talking about Bernie Sanders, and now incumbent president whose ratings have sagged during the COVID-19 crisis and the tumultuous situation in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. The only time you hear George Floyd name now is sometimes they'll mention it in these articles. It's not on the streets anymore. What's happening in the streets of America really has very little to do with George Floyd anymore. He's an afterthought. And I don't say that with any, degree of happiness whatsoever. Matter of fact, I wish what actually happened to George Floyd was the main focus right now, because then we could get behind something and agree on something. But, tearing down of statues, burning of buildings and businesses, killing children in the streets as they sit in their strollers, that kind of thing. If that has anything to do with George Floyd, then I'm sure if George Floyd could be resurrected, he'd say, shame on you. This has nothing to do with George Floyd. There are positive signs, though, for the president. I pointed out some of these in a story, I believe it was last Friday. If you want to see our podcast, by the way, the easiest way to do that is go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. We're here normally every day, Monday through Friday at 8 o'clock, live from Big Daddy Unlimited Studios. But you can go to our YouTube channel, spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. You can check us out on America's Voice News Network. Download the free app, Android, iPhone apps, as well as the streaming services like Apple TV, Roku, and Fire Stick. We're on Dish Network channel 219, and I believe it's channel 247, Pluto Network as well. I don't hold me to the channel part, but Pluto, check it out. But there's some good news for President Trump and some of this stuff. First of all, let me just give you a couple of numbers here. One, go back to the primaries. Yes, Joe Biden has won the Democratic nomination. There's really no doubt about that. And yes, President Trump won it early on. He officially sealed it in the Florida primaries a few months back. But this is something you're not hearing in the mainstream media at all. President Trump, so far in the primaries, with really no reason other than to support President Trump for people to go to the polls, because his nomination was never in jeopardy, that President Trump has gotten 2 million more votes in the primaries so far, and that doesn't even count the last couple we've just had, going back a couple of weeks ago, these latest figures. 2 million more votes in the primaries than he got when he ended up winning the nomination, when there was a reason to go to the polls. To me, that's a big deal. He's also outperformed incumbent presidents in similar situations in primaries where they basically had no opponent. He's outdone Barack Obama and George Bush Jr. by a long shot. So there's good news in that. And the Republican Party, and I reported on this last week as well, you're not hearing much about this. That's why you got to tune into shows like JMT. The Republican Party is currently outpacing the Democratic Party in new voter registrations. Yes, new voter registrations. The Republican Party is outpacing that. Does that mean that President Trump's a shoo-in? No. Does that mean that the polls that are out there that show Biden, the latest one, I think nationally, like 15%? No, it doesn't. In fact, it does mean that we have a lot of work to do. There are encouraging signs, though, and we just need to work our butts off to elect Donald Trump, if that's your candidate. That's what it ultimately means. We need to support the president. We've got to support people who are fighters. That's why and you won't hear this type of stuff anywhere but shows like JMT. That's why I need you, by the way, to support this old fighter. And the best way to do that, there's a couple of ways. Certainly watching the show, liking it, sharing it with others as far and wide is vital. We need that. But if you want to carry it a step further, look in the description of the Facebook when we put up a post for Facebook, and it'll show you a link to support our sponsors. One of them is Big Daddy Unlimited. Check it out. It's all things Second Amendment. It'll save you money. It'll help us a little bit. Check out guns, weapons, ammunition, any tactical stuff, anything that has to do with the Second Amendment. Trust me, it is on Big Daddy Unlimited. Anyway, let's move along. The Biden team certainly isn't going to rewrite any campaign playbooks or dazzle anyone with its brilliance, you think? But it has avoided serious mistakes and demonstrated an understanding of the basic political terrain and its candidate strengths in both the primaries and the general election. I like how they say the Biden's campaign has avoided serious mistakes. I don't know that they have, but there's been an avoidance of coverage of those mistakes for sure. The mainstream media has not asked Joe Biden a serious question since before the Bernie Sanders debate, the last debate when Bernie Sanders basically revealed he had no interest in being president, that Joe Biden has not been asked. Probably the last person to put Joe Biden on his heels, besides Joe Biden himself, might have been Kamala Harris, and he may end up picking her for vice president. We'll see. But it's been basically a big cover-up of the mistakes. Biden certainly hadn't avoided. The only mistakes he's avoided, I guess, is when he's sleeping, maybe. But back to the article. It hasn't asked Biden to do anything, talking about his campaign, anything out of his comfort zone or beyond his capabilities. Listen to that, beyond his capabilities, and has been content for President Donald Trump to dominate all the attention so long as Trump is not advancing his cause, and often setting it back with all the airtime and headlines. So basically, what they're saying is that the president has been stepping on his own feet, so to speak. And there's some truth to that. There's some things that I wish he would do differently. And it is hard for President Trump to actually hit a target that's not only it's not a moving target. Biden doesn't move much. It's hard to put the focus on Joe Biden right now, especially without the help of media just doing the basics of their job. I mean, Donald Trump has got to bring out the negativity of Joe Biden and what his presidency would ultimately be if elected. And that is hard to do simply by yourself. There needs to be some truth in the media, but that's probably beyond their capabilities, at least their willingness anyway. But Joe Biden, I love how they admit that the campaign hadn't asked him to do anything beyond his capabilities. Basically, they've asked him to have a pulse. I mean, that's basically what they've asked him to do. Biden's theory of the Democratic Party, this is an interesting paragraph, because I think it was true years ago. I don't think so much now, and I'll explain. Biden's theory of the Democratic Party, even if it seemed doubtful at the outset, proved correct. That the center of gravity of the party was still with, as he put it, Obama-Biden Democrats, rather than with the avowed socialists and most fervent social justice warriors. In other words, they're not quite ready. The Democratic Party apparatus is not quite ready for a Bernie Sanders, not quite ready. And that Joe Biden has been right all along about being more of a centrist. Now, I don't know that you could say anyone on the 2020 slate was a centrist, but to go along with the article, let's just assume for a second that that's true. Joe Biden, now this is what I meant earlier about he may have used to felt this way. His campaign is the difference between Joe Biden, the person we see today, Joe Biden of yesteryear, and what the campaign is trying to do. There's a difference between that, because the Joe Biden of yesteryear had an agenda. It was to help credit card companies. It was to push unionism and stuff like that. It was to basically feather his own nest, and he did a dadgum good job of that. Just a technical thing till my people, my headphones just went off. But they're back on. Thank you. But Joe Biden, the man himself, he might have had an agenda back, and we're going to play some of Joe Biden from the past back then. But now, Joe Biden, he doesn't have an agenda. The agenda for Joe Biden is the agenda of the progressives of the Democratic Party. I've been saying this the last couple of weeks, and I believe in it more every day. The power behind the throne of Joe Biden, if he is, God help us, becomes president, won't be his vice president, unless, of course, he kicks off. But it will be Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders / Ocasio-Cortez, they are the power behind Joe Biden right now. All you got to do is look at what he signed off on. Basically, he has signed off. He may not be campaigning on it, but he has signed off on the Bernie Sanders agenda. There's really no doubt about that. But it's so to me, the real winners right now are Bernie and his bunch. And you know who's got to be a bit nervous right now? Nervous Nancy. Nancy Pelosi. Now, she may be happy that the Democrats, if the polling is true, may take the Senate. Let's face it, if they take the White House, it's over anyway. But Nancy Pelosi, if the Democrats stay in charge and even gain more power, I think she may actually be out as Speaker of the House because I think they're going to be feel empowered. And I would not, and this my people may just go, oh my God, it would not shock me if somebody like Ocasio-Cortez actually does become the real Speaker of the House and not just the de facto one. Biden hewed to his line when other candidates were going the other way. It might seem obvious. Now, how do they even know that? Because Biden basically, I mean, he was a deer in the headlights and sad, really, during the debates. He didn't make much sense at all. But it says here, it might seem obvious that endorsing Medicare for all, which involves yanking away the private health insurance of more than 100 million, in other words, Bernie Sanders' deal, Americans is foolish and politically indefensible, but several otherwise serious candidates in the Democratic race did it anyway. This, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't talked about this in a while, but the healthcare line that they're not all for single payer is a big lie. Every one of those Democrats is for ultimately single payer. The only reason we got Obamacare as opposed to total nationalized health care, in other words, single payer that does away with insurance companies and basically means that the government runs health care. The only reason we didn't go straight to that is they didn't think it could pass. Do you really believe that all the headache and shambles that the rollout of Obamacare online was an accident and just that they weren't they couldn't they weren't able to do it? They weren't prepared to do it. No, I think it like this plandemic, that was a plandemic as well. They wanted to be so screwed up that we have no choice but the only fix to be single payer. So trust me on this. The only thing keeping us from being totally government run health care is Donald J. Trump. Not even the Republican Party, but Donald Trump, the man, the president. He's the only thing, because if he's not president after 2020, we will go to government-run health care without a doubt. And we may go there anyway. He is indisputably slid left, talking about Biden. Back to this article. This has been his MO his entire career, to stay smack in the middle of whatever is the consensus position of the Democratic Party at any given time. He is he is running on the leftmost platform of any Democratic nominee. Bernie Sanders himself says if Biden is elected, basically going to be the most progressive president ever. And there's no doubt about that. Take these progressives at their word. I keep telling you that. But in a couple of generations, forever, really. But has gone out of his way, talking about Biden, to soften the edges as much as possible. Basically, what this paragraph is admitting to is that Joe Biden is a professional swamp rat. That's all he's ever been. He's really accomplished nothing for the American people unless you consider like 20 plus percentage points interest rate on your credit cards a major accomplishment. Biden, you can pretty much solely thank him for that. But the article says, as a general matter, nothing, talking about Joe Biden, he said, has made much of an impression one way or another. Wow. Think about that statement. If true, to use the Democrats' phrase, if true, it's only because his record has been covered up by the media. Because if you actually look at Joe Biden's record, it is a pretty scary one. We're getting ready to do a couple stories after this about the Black Lives Matter and the whole reparations and everything in between and that. So right now, Joe Biden is the candidate of choice, I guess, by Black America, because it was Black America in the South Carolina primaries that literally salvaged his campaign and saved his political life. And there's a lot of talk that Joe Biden will become president or not based on the black vote. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So if this is your guy, Black America, if people of color in general, but specifically Black America, if this is your guy, can you still vote for him knowing who he really is? And if you don't know who he really is, I'm going to play a video right now. Let me set this up. I've played it before. This is Joe Biden when he was as cognizant as he's going to get. He actually had color in his hair, and it's 1994, actually, when he is talking about the crime bill under Bill Clinton that Joe Biden, was the sponsor of. Listen very carefully in this, because he's talking about essentially white America, as he talks about his kinfolk, and Black America. and he tells you flat out, he doesn't care about the reasons why young black children may be committing crimes and stuff like that. Doesn't care at all. He only cares about getting your predator children off the street. This is the guy who is the answer to black America's problems, Joe Biden. Check it out.
The streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now.
That's good enough.
And Madam President,
ladies and gentlemen, that guy's telling you, take him at his word. He's telling you when he was cognizant, when he had color in his hair and actually hair on his head and his teeth and eyes weren't falling out. He's telling you when it comes to black America, he doesn't care what the underlying problems are. He doesn't care about education and jobs. He doesn't care about single parents and the challenges they face. He doesn't care. He just wants to put your children in the street. And think about this. That was 1994. So we're to believe that he cares now? No, there's a reason why he hadn't spoken out of violence. One of the reasons in the streets of America, one of the reasons is he probably doesn't know what to say. And secondly, he doesn't care. And think about this. That, as I say, that was 1994. A lot of those people he were talking about that were predators are now adults themselves. And your children are being shot in the streets. Your 1-year-old son is being shot in the stomach on a street in the Bronx, New York, just this past week. And Joe Biden, he's already told you he doesn't care. So you can hate Donald Trump all you want. That's fine if you don't like Donald Trump. But at least be truly woke and realize who Joe Biden truly is. So if he is at all cognizant, it's he doesn't care. He simply doesn't care. He tells you that in plain English if you'll just listen. Although Biden would likely win if the election were held today, that's maybe true. Nothing is decided in July. That is absolutely true. Events took a hand earlier this year in making what should have been a political tailwind for Trump into a stiff headwind. Something unforeseeable, they're talking about the pandemic, could change the dynamic yet again. So there are unforeseen things that could happen. And better economic conditions could improve the overall atmosphere. That, ladies and gentlemen, that last sentence is why they are desperate to shut us down. Why in Florida, for instance, the media, I was listening to Morning Schmo this morning, and oh my God, man, you would think that Florida people are literally dropping over dead in the street, that if you go down a street in Miami, you're going to see bodies stacked up like cordwood. That's what they're making you believe here is happening in Florida. I'm not downplaying that we're not having a viral outbreak, but the death toll is still relatively small. And if it's someone you care and love and all that and they die, it's way, way too big. One person, as President Trump said, one death is way too many. But the reality is they have to keep us shut down until Wednesday. You say Wednesday? Yeah, I'm talking about Wednesday. I think it's November 4th, the day after election, because they realize that they being the powers that be in the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, and the Never Trumpers realize that the only real shot Biden has is if the economy is in total free fall. And they're worried about that. As I say, this election is not about Joe Biden. If it is, it's over already. Trump derangement syndrome is what this is about. It is basically going to come down to how much passion and support Donald Trump has from his MAGA hat wearing Sons of Gun Dregs Society base. You know, you 15% of people out there that, as Biden said, just bad folks. If you bad folks show up, that's 50 million, by the way, show up to the polls to vote versus those that believe in Trump derangement syndrome. Because no one really, probably not even Jill Biden, is showing up to vote for Joe Biden. If every vote for Joe Biden is really pretty much an anti-Trump vote. That's just the way it is, man. And debates, are we even going to have any debates? Because Joe Biden, if you listen to this article, and there's a lot like this, he has no reason to debate. And can you imagine a situation where Joe Biden goes into a debate and comes out the other side looking better than he did when he went in? I don't see a scenario of that. And so what is Donald Trump's message? There's a lot of criticism right now about Donald Trump's message from supposed corners that support the president. And it is difficult to get out a message when the entire media is basically against you. That's why you got to watch JMT, by the way, things like that. And so Donald Trump does need to do a better job of getting his message out. He doesn't need to talk as much about what he's already done, because people don't vote for what you've already done. They vote for what they hope you'll do. So I think he needs to talk more about what his next 4 years would look like and contrast that to what a 4 years under Biden, or even a day without Trump, I should say, would look like. And the biggest thing about it, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to hit on this more and more all the time, we as Americans, not just Donald Trump supporters, but Americans, we've got to wake up. We've got to come out of our long slumber. I'm becoming more convinced than ever that since World War II, we have been on snooze control, where we push that button when the alarm went off. Every time an alarm goes off, we just hit snooze. Not everybody, but as a body politic as a whole, we have been on snooze control. We've been fat and happy and enjoying ourselves, which is a great thing, but we have let the people who hate America rise to the top, and we should have been smashing them, whack-a-moling them down from the very beginning. The real question, ladies and gentlemen, is, do we want to be a constitutional republic anymore? Because if you do, it takes work. You can't be both ignorant and free, as Thomas Jefferson said, because you want what was and never will be. He also said that the tree of liberty has to be watered by the blood of patriots sometimes, and sometimes just by the sweat of patriots. You cannot hold on to a constitutional republic, like Benjamin Franklin warned us, without work. What is that? There's a book out there. There's a book somewhere that says something about faith without works is dead. Maybe we ought to read it a time or two. It's out there somewhere. It sold a few copies. But that is a true statement. Faith, you can have all the faith. Donald Trump 2020, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. But we got to put some works behind that. We still must do that. And do we really want the president of the United States to be the leader of the free world? Donald Trump is the leader of the free world right now. There's no doubt about that. Some people don't like it. Some people hate it. But he is. Barack Obama didn't even want to be leader of the free world. He just wanted to be a voice in a chorus. And I'm afraid that if Joe Biden actually becomes president, we'll just become a province of China. Because make no mistake about it, Joe Biden is in the pocket of the Chinese. So I don't know if Biden is running a smart campaign or not. He can win. That's the thing. He could actually win if we don't wake up from our long slumber and put faith with those works. That's what we got to do. All right, we're going to move along to a Breitbart story. And it was inevitable that it was going to happen. But this is about reparations for, I'm assuming, slavery. North Carolina City Council votes in favor of reparations for black residents. North Carolina, Asheville City Council on Tuesday voted unanimously to pass a repentant measure that formally apologizes to black residents and moves to issues reparations in the form of investments in certain areas of the community through creation of the Community Reparations Commission. Boy, that's a long thing. So they're basically saying they're not going to do cash payments just yet. They're talking about changing policies, rules, regulations, maybe even laws within the city of Asheville to compensate for slavery. I'm not so sure. Does that mean that if you were a slave, you can enslave someone who wasn't? I'm not sure. But this brings up some bigger questions, because we're going to talk about this if we have time in this next article too. What is the definition of Black America? Is it a particular shade? Is it a particular percentage of Black DNA? I don't know. I'm just asking. I think about like out in New Orleans. I haven't talked about this in a while, but out in New Orleans, they have these clubs for like Mardi Gras. And some of them are pretty exclusive clubs, and they have predominantly black ones, white ones, mixed ones. But years ago, they actually, in the black ones, there was a prejudice. And I can tell you this absolutely exists in the South for sure. There is a prejudice that is almost totally unspoken of in the black community, and it has to do with skin color and how dark you are. The darker you are, the more you're pushed aside. That's a fact, not by white folks, but by black folks. In New Orleans, getting back to that example, there were clubs that actually had what they called the bag test. And if you were darker than a paper bag, which is tan in color, we don't see much paper bags these days, if you were darker than that, you couldn't get in. And this was not done by white folks. It was done by a different shade of pale, I suppose. I don't know. But so what is the percentage? Can you just claim to be black? Like Liawapa Elizabeth Warren. We hadn't heard much from her lately. She seems to be pushed aside. I call her Liawapa Elizabeth Warren. You know, she claimed to be Cherokee, and we found out that by her own DNA test, she's one of the whitest women that ever walked the planet. But she still claims to have Indian heritage. Can you simply claim to be black, and get paid? Because there'd be a lot of people that would do that in a heartbeat. The resolution, which passed 7-0, does not include cash payments made directly to black residents, but does call on the city to form Community Reparations Commission. No chance for corruption in that. We'll talk about a waste of time, which would hear from community leaders and groups who would in turn make recommendations on where funds should be directed. It's all about the Benjamins. Wouldn't it be easier? I mean, Asheville, couldn't you just paint like Black Lives Matter on every street? Wouldn't that be enough? I mean, they painted it in front of Trump Towers, right? You remember what de Blasio said, and this still just gets me, how he actually looked in the cameras and said, when somebody threw red paint on his pet project up there, that he said, we're doing something here. We're righting a wrong. So in other words, painting Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Towers was righting a wrong. I still don't get that. Maybe it's a white thing. I don't know. But I'd ask you, does painting Black Lives Matter actually right any wrong? Does putting forward a commission like they're doing here in Asheville actually make any difference to anyone who ever suffered from slavery? I don't see how it does, but maybe I'm wrong. Keith Young, a black member of the City Council of Asheville, said hundreds of years of black blood spilled that basically fills the cup we drink from today. So he's basically saying that everything's successful. And you hear this a lot, that America would not be America if it weren't for black slavery. And there's some truth to that. I'm not down. I mean, you could say the West wouldn't have been the West without Chinese labor. You could say New York City wouldn't exist without Irish labor or Italian labor. America is a hodgepodge. We're a bunch of mutts. Let's face it. We're not a bunch of aristocratic purebloods here in the United States, which is a strength, by the way. And I celebrate it. Believe me, I'm a mutt and I know it. And some people go, he's a fat hillbilly. Well, the fat part's right. There ain't no hills where I live. That's a hundred. I'm getting attacked a lot lately, which is a badge of honor to me and Billy Bob. If you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, he's Billy Bob Bass. He has a Twitter handle at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. And no, we don't deal in cryptocurrency as the hack went on there or anything like that. But they make it sound like that America would not be the same without black Americans. And it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be the same without Chinese Americans, Irish Americans, Italian Americans, old English guys like me or whatever, Scotch Irish, those kind of things. I mean, it would not be the same without all of us. We are a melting pot. We're the mutts that made something great. Can we keep it? That's the real question. But this member of the city council in Asheville said it's simply not enough to remove statues. Black people in this country are dealing with issues that are systematic in nature. So your election, sir, means nothing. The fact that you're even up there elected to this office doesn't mean anything. I think it means a lot. Does it mean that racism is over? No. But institutionalized systematic racism must be over to a certain extent, or how did you ever get elected? The measure tilted resolution supporting community reparations for Black Asheville cites a host of reasons for the resolution, including racist practices in the private realty market, discriminatory wages, inadequate health care, and policing. But I thought we wanted to do away with policing. So Black Asheville, let me ask you, Black Asheville, is Martin Luther King's dream just completely dead? Is it over? Is it completely dead? Because it seems to be. Remember one of his most famous things about, and we'll show a few memes here in a row here, about character versus color of skin? I mean, right now it seems like, I don't know that Martin Luther King would even recognize this movement right now as Black Lives Matter movement, because it's all about color of skin and nothing to do with character. What character they show is pretty much bad character, right? Maybe they're actually supporters of Mr. Biden. But how about the fact that about silence? It kind of puts a different spin on this mean. You know, this is one of the great sayings I believe Martin Luther King ever had. We talked about the evil. He said this in various variations, but essentially said that the times won't be judged by the evil that men do, but by the good people who sit by silently and let it happen, in a sense. Isn't that what's happening right now? There's a lot of evil being portrayed on our streets, destruction of monuments, burning of buildings, not to mention the death of people. Little children are being murdered, most of them by other black people. Black babies are dying, you know, BLM, Black Lives Matter, want it be Babies' Lives Matter, this kind of thing. And people are being silent about it on both sides of the aisle. And, you know, and exactly a different spin on what Martin Luther King said, but as evil nonetheless. And then, of course, Dr. King, I mean, he had so many great things to say. He talked about how we might not have come here on the same boat, but we're surely in the same boat now. I mean, isn't that true? If we're going to survive as a nation, we don't have to agree on everything, but don't we have to agree that we're in the same dadgum boat? I mean, it's just sad, man, that Dr. King, it just makes me sad because I'm a big fan of Dr. Martin Luther King. I always have been. And it seems like his life, and I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but it seems like his life doesn't have any meaning right now. And if true, that is a sad, sorry state indeed. Back to this article. Let me check the time. I got a couple more minutes because I want to get into this next story a little bit. The measure states unequivocally, talking about this Reparations Act in Asheville, North Carolina, that systematic racism was created over centuries and will take time to dismantle. True, and declares that state and federal governments have a responsibility to adopt programs, policies, and funding to address reparations. They've already done that to a certain extent. We have eliminated systematic racism. In other words, it doesn't mean that individuals aren't racist, but there aren't Jim Crow laws, there aren't whites only stuff, all that kind. We have ended systematic racism in America. We have. Have we ended racism? No. Is it going to happen anytime soon? Probably not. Come a long way, but you cannot legislate what's in a man's heart. You just can't do it. Not yet. Not yet. There is no thought police and soul police, so to speak. There might not be any real police if the left has its way, but you can pass every law you can. You'll paint Black Lives Matter on the pavement in front of every house. You can take away everybody's guns like they're taking away the people's guns out there in St. Louis. You know, the cops wouldn't come to protect them, but they came to take their guns. That's Biden's America, by the way. I mean, all of that. You can do everything. You can try to right a wrong, like de Blasio says, but you're never going to legislate what's in a person's heart. It's just not going to happen. And thank God less people have that in their heart. If you don't think that's true, then you got your head buried in the sand. The resolution has the city council apologizing for its participation in sanctioning of the enslavement of black people, as well as for its enforcement of segregation and its accompanying practices. So I got a question for you with reparations. How far back do you go? Are we talking about reparations for slavery to every single aspect of it? Because it's pretty far back, 400 years just in the New World, so to speak. How far back do you go? And this is interesting. You know, there's a group of people that probably should have more call for reparations maybe than any other race or ethnic group, if you want to, and it's the Jewish people who've been in the news a bit lately, being attacked by black people, by the way, you know, wrongfully so. Bunch of anti-Semitic stuff out there. We need to straighten that out. But think about it. Do you ever hear the Jews talk about, and I know a lot of black people are very religious, but have you ever heard Jews talk about tearing down the pyramids? Really? I mean, didn't they build them? Did they talk about tearing them down? And maybe it was the ancient aliens, and maybe the Jews know it, and that's why they're not talking about it. But do you ever hear about that? Do you ever hear them saying to Germany that, hey, you need to pay us back? I mean, I don't ever hear that. I just hear them going to work and getting it done and trying to keep it in perspective and everything. I have, if there's any one group of people that I have the utmost respect for, it's Jewish people, man. They are, I mean, we could learn a lot from the Jewish people. I'm just going to say that. And it calls, talking about this deal, I love this part right here. It says it calls for this act in Asheville. Other organizations, institutions, city that have advanced and benefited from racial inequality to apologize along with the city council. I guess everybody needs to take a knee. We just have take a knee day, right? Address systematic racism. It also urges state and federal government to initiate policy making, provide funding for reparations, state and national levels. It always is that. So if you listen to this, you would think that there never were any impoverished, poorly educated white folks in North Carolina. I mean, have you ever been to like the Mass store? If you haven't ever been there, it's in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. You ought to check it out. It's a couple of 100 years old at least. They've got pictures basically of transition of time. There weren't a lot of slaves, as far as I know, up in the mountains of North Carolina. It just didn't set up for that. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but there was mostly poverty up there. Look at the pictures. I got just a couple I wanted to post here of people in the 1800s, basically, in North Carolina. And don't look they're living like a whole lot of privilege there to me. And there's the next picture shows like three dudes that are absolutely the epitome of white privilege in the mountains of North Carolina. I mean, they're just working people. That's all they are. I mean, it's the idea that the only people who suffered in North Carolina were people of color is ridiculous. And I love the state of North Carolina. I'm not being critical of it at all. As for the local level, the city council, let me skip down to this. Here's something that says the resolution states in part for achieving equity will be enforced in the appropriate offices. So they're going to have a race police, thought police. I guess they do away with the real police and just have that. But here's this. I'm going to read this last part, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes on this last story. But they say basically that they want reparations for increased minority business ownership, affordable housing, increased minority home ownership, career opportunities, strategies to grow equity and generational wealth. Basically, it sounds like they want to do what President Trump was doing before the pandemic happened. Biden doesn't care. America sucks. I mean, basically, what's happening in America right now, the Democratic platform, America sucks. It's always sucked. It sucks for some more than others. If you vote for us, it'll suck for all of us equally. I got to get into this last story here, and I only got about 2 or 3 minutes to do it. This is from Fox News. The D.C. you need to read this article. D.C. Museum criticized for saying delayed gratification and decision-making are aspects of whiteness. You want to know how crazy it is getting? Basically, there's a museum up there, and they're saying that things like this, they got a graphic that shows it. It says the graphic, which is part of Talking About Race article at Taxpayer-Funded Museum's website, discusses how white dominant culture or whiteness have instilled a long list of values in the U.S. and this is somehow wrong for black people to adopt. Since white people still hold most of institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. It goes on to say the museum's graphics breaks the aspects, assumptions of whiteness into categories such as rugged individualism. Nah, that's a no-no. Teaching your history, that's a no-no. Wow. I mean, what about the rugged individuals like Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks? There have been some rugged individualists in the blacks community. But here's what they say. For example, under future orientation, the graphic lists delayed gratification. So in other words, saving your money to buy something later instead of just spending it all right now. That's a white thing, and black people shouldn't adopt that. And planning for the future as ideas spread by white culture. So making a plan for your future is a white thing and thus a bad thing. This is from the African American Museum. It's crazy. Other aspects of whiteness included objective, rational, linear thinking. So thinking, cause and effect relation, hard work being the key to success. Are you really buying this BS, Black America? I cannot believe that. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, in Black America, I'm telling you, there are some evil forces out against you, and it ain't the Republican Party and Donald Trump. A lot of us, these Democratic progressives, they are trying to destroy Black America. Because if you don't believe in delayed gratification, if you don't believe in hard work leads to success, I mean, now they're wanting abortion by mail. I don't know if you saw that or not, by email, basically. I mean, these progressive white Dems, man, they seem to be hell-bent on destroying Black America. I'm just calling it as I see it. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Let's all pray for the good old United States of America. Support those in the fight like us here at JMT. Go to our sponsors link on the Facebook description there and check us out. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day. Thank you.